The time is 5:30, so I'll call this meeting of the Newark City Council Finance Committee to order. Members present are Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Marby, Mr. Bubb, Mr. Cost, and myself. We do have two items on our agenda this evening. Just as a reminder, we'll have, after the title's read, the administration will speak to the legislation. If you have any questions or comments, please come to the podium and direct your questions to the chair. Our first piece of legislation is to consider resolution number 1456, appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation. And I see Ms. Gilks approaching the podium.
This legislation is to reimburse the costs that were funded by the various divisions for the demo of 2022 North 4th Street.
Any questions from the committee regarding this piece of legislation? Motion by Mr. Marmy. Second, Mrs. Floyd. Any further questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor move this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Our second piece of legislation tonight is consider resolution number 1457, authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for financial support from the state of Ohio 2014 NatureWorks Grant Fund. Ms. Gilks.
The application for NatureWorks has changed from February 1st to September 1st. So we received word that the new funding round application will be out. Licking County is eligible for $48,781. So we will be looking at submitting an application to do some type of improvement at one of the parks, the 75-25 split.
Motion by Mrs. Floyd. Second, Mr. Cost. Questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor move this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much, Ms. Hills. And that concludes the agenda for Finance Committee tonight. And the next, so we'll consider that committee adjourned. And the next one up is service.
We're going to bring the Service Committee meeting to order. Members present are Mr. Bubb, Mr. Blake, Mr. Roletta, Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost. Our first ordinance, 1418, changing the zoning classification of certain real property, generally described as 398 Eastern Avenue, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of single-family residence, RH, high-density zoning district, to GO, General Office Zoning District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we're simply asking you to do tonight is to pass this on to the Planning Commission. At the Planning Commission level, we'll have a public meeting, and I'll render an opinion on this after we've had a public meeting. The intent here is to tear a house down and to make additional parking for the facility there. We've had some further discussion about maybe some fencing. Councilman Costa and I talked about that today. We will take that into consideration when we give our opinion on whether or not it should be changed. But at this point, I just ask you to move it to the Planning Commission level.
Motion. Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Buck. Mr. Roletta. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? What order is that? First one. Any other questions from the committee or from the audience? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. 5-0. Moved on to planning committee. Thank you, Mr. Rich. Second ordinance is resolution number 1455, authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to enter into a right to a lease agreement and easement agreement on behalf of the City of Newark for certain real property located at Levin Park, Sharon Valley Road, Newark, Ohio, parcel 054-286-350-01000, lot 5, consisting of 21.30 acres.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The city's been approached, and I've had tentative conversations with a group called Capital Telecom. They would like to put a cell phone tower up on the back part of Levin Field, behind the ball fields, up close to the woods. So we spent a little time talking with the property owners that Levin backs up to, one being the Evans Foundation, the other being Gary McIntyre. There's no opposition from them in terms of a tower there. We've had preliminary discussions of where they could maybe put it, so it would be up closer to the woods and that area, so it would not be, it really wouldn't take away from the aesthetics of the park. I have not negotiated with them, but generally these leases carry a value of somewhere between $9,000 and $11,000 a year. And Director Kaufman negotiated one that went on top of Lawrence Hill, and I believe it brings in $10,000 a year. So that's probably where I would kind of look at, and maybe some increases every year off of that. And I would certainly negotiate in good faith that they pay for all the construction, all the repairs, all the maintenance, and this and that. And, I just am asking you for the permission to actually negotiate with them, but this opportunity is in front of us, and my recommendation would be if we're successful with the negotiation that the dollars just roll into the general fund, similar to what we're doing with the Lawrence Hill Park cell phone tower.
Make a motion.
Second. Second by Mr. Rath. Any questions from the members of the committee? Mr. Rath.
Are we going to need to construct a road to go through the park to the tower location?
No, we won't.
I don't mean we, I meant they. Because we, I'm voting against it.
You can put it behind the, maybe a temporary road that they would to get back there to place the tower. But, we cut the grass back there quite often. When I say we, the Lawrenceburg Little League does, and they have tractors that roll on that. I think a truck driving across that would be just fine for a service thing, but maybe for construction, yes, they might have to. And if they do, we'll get all those details worked out. That's something we have not talked about. In our view, and we've talked with them a little bit, if you look on the back part of that park behind the ball fields, you have Lincoln Rural Electric, who has a power station there. We're envisioning this being just to the left of that power station and up in the woods a touch.
Any questions from the other members of the committee?
Mr. Chair. Director Rose, were there any proposals from, or offers from any other providers, or just kind of?
No. What this is, I think the cellular groups that they represent have coverage and a gap problem. So it's not something we put an RFP out for, a request for proposal for. It's something that was floating around in that area, and they first tried with the college, and the college said they didn't have an interest, and they bumped into a couple other entities, and they bumped into us, and I said, well, wait a minute, we've got a power station up there, and we do own the land, and as long as we can get it up in the woods, I'd be willing to make the presentation to council. And I looked at it as another opportunity to bring, again, another $9,000 to $11,000 at no cost to us into the general fund. And that's the way I kind of looked at it. And in the negotiations, we'll talk about aesthetics. We'll talk about if they have to build a roadway in. We'll talk about how they repair that roadway. All of those things. But those are details I can't get into now because I don't have the permission. And that's what I'm asking for, is just the permission to negotiate.
Mr. Rhodes, the other tower that you spoke of on Horns Hill, how long ago was that?
Director Kaufman did that, so I'm going to say 3.5, 4 years.
And has that been a good?
It's been a good thing. The city gets $10,000 a year off of it. Check comes in, is negotiated. It is we have no maintenance to it. We have nothing more than Our only work we spend each year is when the check comes into my office to make sure the check gets down to the treasurer's office. It's a pretty good deal.
Is there any liability on our part?
No, they cover the liability of the town.
And the money from the one at Horns Hill, that goes into general?
Goes into general fund, yes it does.
Thank you.
And then, council each year appropriates the budget, so if you guys want to earmark that for something, you could. Or my thoughts would be just let it roll back into the general fund and let us make a presentation on the budget.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
It's kind of a rolling eye.
Wait for the rest of the sentence.
The rolling vote is 5-0. And we'll move this on. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next committee is Economic Development.
Stay on one foot and jump. Okay, we'll call the Economic Development Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Cost, Blake, Hall, and Johnson. We are here to consider ordinance number 14-19, approving the historic designation of 112 West Main Street as a local historic property and declaring an emergency. Mr. Moderator is here to speak on that. I believe he has handouts for the committee members and for Mr. Williams.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, do any of the committee members need a copy of the guidelines that we use for the committee? Okay.
I will be back the other side.
It's okay. Spare, please. Well, what I thought we'd do, since this is the first time the committee or council's been through this process of having a certified local government bring forth a historical designation, I thought I might just take a minute to sort of take you through the process that we've been going through. If I may just take a couple minutes and I'll just step through some of that. First of all, this, as you said, is the ordinance where we're asking council to simply approve historical destination for 112 West Main Street. Back in November of last year, this council passed ordinance number 13-36A, which created chapter 1450 of the codified ordinance of the city. And what that ordinance did is, one of the things it did is require a 5-member committee to be put together, a review committee, that would review applications that were submitted for this designation by City Council. And it's to help us get properties that are outside of the historical district of Newark. And this particular property at 112 West Main is just outside of the historical district. So, the committee accepted an application, and we met on June the 6th, just a couple weeks ago, in a public hearing right here in council chambers. And we considered the application for the formal school building located at 112 West Main. This application, again, just basically requests that it be designated as historic. The committee reviewed the application. We interviewed Mr. Steve Lehman, who is the applicant, and we used the criteria that's outlined on the handout that I gave you, 1450.06, Part A, and numbers 1 through 9, and we used that criteria to judge the merits of the application. Upon the committee's review and so forth, we voted unanimously to approve the application and send it to council for their approval. City Council's approval is vital to the financial viability of this economic development project that Mr. Lehman is undertaking. I cannot stress that enough. This historic designation at a local level is then going to allow this project to apply for both state and federal historic preservation tax credits. And those tax credits are what's going to make this economically feasible for him to undertake this project. The timing for the application to be made to the state and federal agencies will require that this legislation be declared an emergency for timing purposes. It's very important we get this through so Mr. Lehman can proceed with his plans and so forth for this project and submit his applications on time for these other state and federal tax credits. So, on behalf of the Committee for Design and Preservation, I strongly recommend to Council and this committee that we approve this designation and move ordinance number 14-19 on to full council for a vote. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
For starters, could you tell us who is on the committee, who the 5 members are? I know you chair it, but who are the other 4?
Sure. I'm the chair. Bruce Bain is the vice chair. Zane Wachtel is a committee member. Phil Claggett is a committee member. And Doug Mill is a committee member. And then Fred Ernest is our CIC representative. But he is not a voting member of the board.
Okay. Mr. Blake, you got a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Since this is our first time going through this, just some of my questions are just very broad and just wanted to seek information. What are the boundaries of the historic district? You said that this is just right outside of that historic district.
It is. I've got a map in my office, Jeremy, that I can share with you. But basically it is the south, starts South Park Place, okay? And it extends down to, over to Church Street. That's why Tom Atha, you saw recently got his state tax credits. His building was within the historic district. So that extends then down Church Street toward 4th Street. Okay? So on the west side, it's basically from 3rd down to 4th and partially down to 5th as well. And I'm a little hazy on the exact boundaries of that, but the map does show that. And then also on the south side of the square for about a block. Okay? Obviously on the west side we have the newer developments with the Licking County Administration Building, the Wendy's Building, First Federal, and so on. Okay, that's why those were not included in the historic district. Because those buildings are less than 50 years old. Okay?
And so that district, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So that district was designated by this. The city had to apply to the state to create that district.
I believe that it was before my time. That has been in existence for some time.
I see. And so if we didn't have this process, this local identification process, then Mr. Lehman or others would have to go and work with the state bureaucrats to get this done. Is that what
Jeremy, you nailed it right on the head. This will probably take that process from what could be as much as 2-year process down to literally a couple months process.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bonner, if you could maybe follow up and email us a copy of that map.
Be glad to.
That would be appreciated. And would anticipate talking about this further in the future. Might be helpful to have. Any questions? Any other questions from committee members? Any questions from the audience? Mrs. Floyd.
I don't really have a question. I'm very much in favor of this project, but just from a historic standpoint, obviously that was Newark High School, and this has been pointed out in the newspaper and everything, and then was used as an intermediate school, and then has been used as the elementaries have been fixed. But one thing that hadn't been mentioned is that's where the Newark campus of Ohio State University started. It started in 1957. Classes were held there after school was out. I mean, I went there for my first 2 years at Ohio State, and you went to class starting at, 3:30, 4 o'clock, and classes went till 10 o'clock at night. And that happened from 1957 until 1965. In the fall of 1965, those classes then moved to the new high school, which is now gone, for the newer high school. But I just think it's important to understand from a historic perspective, that was the beginning of Ohio State University in Newark. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Make a motion.
A motion by Johnson, seconded by Cost.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I was just curious, Mr. Lehman's in the audience. You want to speak about the future use of the building and this sort of investment that you're making into our downtown?
The plans...
If you could approach the podium so we could get you on the microphone, please. Since Mr. Blake has taken over the meeting.
Steve Lehman, 9 North 3rd Street. The plan right now is to convert the building into 27 market rate apartment units that would, for the most part, take advantage of the existing classrooms. Some of the larger rooms might be divided, and the old boiler room will become several apartments. And there's a hallway, bathroom combination that will become apartments. There's 18 classrooms in there, so you can see we're stretching. It should be 27 apartments. There'll be an elevator. The architect has a great design. We're looking forward to being able to do it. And I would just say that the city is, I think, has been great on this creation of the CLG and the process, and it's taken time, but I think the process has been done right, and we're very pleased with the progress, and we're looking forward to making our application.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to come up and just wish you luck. I hope this is a good plan that works out well for you. Ultimately, that'll work out well for the city as well. So, seeing no other questions or comments, call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? My motion passes 5-0. With no other items to discuss, this committee will be adjourned, and that concludes committee meetings for this evening.